On?
Yeah, I've put it immediately back on.
Okay. So Jackson ruined the stream.
I ruin things. I'm a professional ruiner. I'm an amateur ruiner. I don't get paid to ruin
We're back.
things.
I don't know where I was. They're cordoning off the bays. They tape newspaper. It's dumb. Here's the part where this scrappy, almost underwater business spends
Hello,
$10,000
Paris.
on
Jay
surveillance
Atomic
equipment.
here.
So that's
You know,
good.
nothing beats the thrill of the chase. Am I right?
Next,
Race
Benny
northwest to
upgraded
the
their
country
security
club.
cameras to include an audio pickup. Then he installed an upscale burglar alarm that came complete with infrared capability and motion detection equipment. He did all of this without advertising the upgrade by applying warning stickers on the outside doors and walls. They all agreed if they were going to catch someone sneaking in, they wanted to do it quietly so they could deal with it in the same way. Are they just going to murder anyone who comes in?
Probably.
Benny also advised them to not talk to anyone about what they were doing, even in a peripheral way. Loose lips sink ships, he told them over and over, and they knew completely buttoning up on the project would be in their best interest. They would continue doing business as usual at the garage, changing oil, giving out inspection stickers, doing tune-ups. They would work on the project mostly at night and into the morning before the dwindling number of customers who still frequented the place showed up.
Man, this sounds like a plan concocted at an Applebee's.
They even put into place a system where any overly exotic part they needed, something not usually used in a typical civilian car, would be bought only from a rotating file of online dealers as opposed to ordering it through the local Napa Auto Parts store. That place, they knew, was in a potential nest of spies. I mean, this is basically the plan that Bruce Wayne had when he built the Batman suit in Batman Begins, right?
Yeah.
Like, Alfred's like, gotta order bulk from all these different dealers all over the world so nobody knows that you're building a bat
But
suit.
Batman Begins is dumb too. Let's not beat
Oh,
around
for
the bush.
sure. But I like that they thought this plan was better than going to Napa Auto Parts to buy like custom parts for this priceless. I mean, they're right. You probably shouldn't buy your parts at Napa for like this car that costs millions of dollars.
Maybe they probably wouldn't have them. This is a custom job right
Yeah.
here. If he could just go to Napa, he wouldn't need you guys.
Okay, so the first Fast and Furious movie is based on like a news article that what's his face who directed it saw, and he was like, "Oh, the kids must be into street racing. Let's make a movie about that." I feel like that movie was more informed about how actual street racing works
See
than
those
this
combos.
stupid book.
It's stunt run.
Obviously
yeah.
written by someone who doesn't know the first thing about cars other than what they read on Wikipedia.
This movie is informed either by the most cynical cash-in ever, or by someone going, "This will be really dumb." Whereas the Fast and Furious, the first one, comes from an earnest place. Did not end up there, but that's where it came from.
Benny was so precise that he even came up with a system of how they would dispose of parts and use debris that they could be traced back to the Shelby, instead of throwing it all away in the Marshall Motors dumpster, providing valuable clues to what they were up to. He had them loaded all into garbage bags, which he then disposed of at various dumpsters around town. As he told them many times, this is how the CIA would do it. They worked out a schedule of 2 men on, 2 men off, Pete being the swingman. 2 mechanics would be on hand during regular business hours to do the everyday Marshall Motors grunt work, while 2 would come in after closing and work on the supercar, which had been put up on the lift in bay number 3 throughout the night. Little Pete showed up whenever he was needed, or at least that was the plan. In reality, he was there almost all the time, day or night. Next to Toby, he put in the most hours on the project, as he knew it might lead to one of his visions actually coming true.
So dead.
But in the end, the car was Toby's baby. He frequently did double duty, working the garage during the day and then working the project all night. When they got near the end, to the point where they didn't have to work continual nights anymore, Toby still stayed in the garage, sleeping next to the Mustang in progress, baseball bat always within reach, keeping watch. By that point, he didn't want to leave it alone even for a minute. The first thing they had to do after the car arrived was, surprisingly, get rid of a lot of the stuff that had come with it. As beautiful as the overall design was, or had been intended to by the late great Carroll Shelby, by the time the car got into their hands, it had a lot of stock and inadequate equipment attached to it. Just why this was, they never found out. It might have been from a previous attempt to bring the car to life, or maybe someone else's stab at security, hiding the jewel under a bunch of cheap parts. But whatever the case, a lot of it had to go. The wheels, the tires, the drive shaft, even the reconditioned 302 engine all went in the trash. Getting rid of the 302 was especially painful. It was a sweet motor, but way below the standard they needed to make their vision run. Plus, they didn't want to hold on to anything that could link them back to the antique Shelby. It's not a part that came with the Shelby. Why do they need to get rid of it? They could put it in a different car.
Shut up.
So everything from the brakes to the axles, from the differential to the exhaust, and even the gas tank was taken off, cut up into little pieces, and put into garbage bags for Benny to drop off all over the area. Next, they needed a real engine, something befitting what they were trying to build. As everything was being paid for by Dino's credit card, the Marshall crew didn't care about expense. As long as it worked, they weren't going to be concerned where the green was coming from or how much of it they spent. They just had to keep hard and fast documentation on everything in case Dino reverted to his usual devilish ways. So after doing some research, they purchased a 5.4-liter Ford all-aluminum DOHC engine with aluminum heads. Once this powerhouse was on site, they installed forged aluminum pistons and rods and attached a treated forged crankshaft onto it. Everything went smoothly. The cylinders went in next, after they were coated with plasma arc ion oxide to reduce friction. Then came the supercharger, the high-volume oil pump, and a dry sump oil system, all bought online from Japan. They machined the heads to improve valve action, and even polished their interiors to get better airflow. They then put in 4 high-duration camshafts and 8 huge fuel injectors, along with special high-volume fuel lines to keep the juice flowing when they needed it. This is like Star Trek technobabble.
Yeah. Pretty much. Have they put a replicator in there?
Reverse the Polarion flow. After fitting on long tube exhaust headers, it came down to the spark plugs. It took Toby an entire day online trying to figure out which spark plugs to buy. And once
in
they
the
arrived,
movie.
what their proper gapping width should be.
Toby sat at the computer all day and like, I can't find.
Should I get this one or should I get this one? I don't know.
Do it.
I mean, this one's got better reviews. This one has no reviews.
This one.
Maybe I'll watch a YouTube video comparing the two. But once all these things have been done, the entire gang gathered inside bay number 3, crossed their fingers en masse, and turned the temporary ignition switch. The engine came to life with a roar so loud their heads hurt for days. They didn't mind a bit, though. It was music to their ears. Though the engine still needed some tweaking right out of the gate, it began running at more than 6,000 RPMs, which they determined could translate to almost 750 horsepower with a potential of 900. This, they knew, would mean the completed Mustang could reach a speed somewhere around 230 miles per hour, an astonishing number that would have impressed Carroll Shelby himself. It's not up to the mythical, unreachable speed of 250, though.
Awesome driving. You nailed that burning room.
In any case, it was an amazing achievement for 5 glorified grease monkeys from Marshall Motors. They'd set out to create a monster, and that's exactly what they did. But most monsters come with problems, and theirs was no different. All the undercarriage work went well. They stiffened the chassis with heavy steel subframe connectors and installed top-of-the-line adjustable shocks and springs. They put a heavy-duty battery in the rear quarter of the trunk and installed a huge fuel pump plus booster and an overly large exhaust system. They thought the hardest task would be modifying the steering column to accommodate their gear shift paddles, which were installed on the steering wheel, eliminating the need for a stick shift and a clutch. But all that went well too. Then it came time to put in the drive shaft. They'd purchased one from the best dealer in the country and had high hopes for a smooth installation. But no matter what they did, the custom shaft just would not fit. They didn't know why. They checked and rechecked their measurements. Everything seemed okay. They checked their clearances, but again, nothing was askew. They spent 3 days and nights trying every way they knew to get the shaft connected, yet nothing worked. They even machined down the ends of the very expensive shaft, hoping to gain a few precious millimeters. But once again, it was no soap. Is that a phrase? It was no soap.
I have not heard this phrase.
And I'm from this country. That's not a thing people say.
No.
And because they designed that portion of the drivetrain to fit this particular exotic drive shaft, there was no alternative out there for them to replace it. So they had to invent one. Joe Peck and Finn pulled an all-nighter at the height of the crisis. When Toby came in the next morning, he found them both asleep or passed out. It was hard to tell which.
None of
But
this
on the
is going to be in
stand
the
was
film.
a new, completely original drive shaft they'd constructed out of carbon fiber material. How does a backwater shop have the ability to construct a drive shaft out of carbon fiber?
I would stop thinking.
They have a credit card, I guess. You can buy a lot of things online.
That's true.
Toby was astonished. They were all good at connecting things to cars, putting on parts bought from manufacturers and making them go. But to manufacture something like this on their own? He woke Joe long enough to have him swear the new drive shaft fit and would work. And as a bonus, it would lighten the overall weight of the car, a very important factor. After a few hours rest, they put the new piece of equipment to the test, and sure enough, it fit perfectly and ran perfectly. It was that morning that Toby knew something very special was happening inside Marshall Motors. They're all descending into madness. That's what's happening.
All hail the shaft, it fits perfectly.
Brake work came next, never a favorite for any mechanic. But while I went slow, attaching 14-inch 6-piston disc brake calipers and brake pads in the front and 13-inch ones in the back, it also went well. This is the worst. Everything worked after just a few adjustments. The wheels came next, hugely expensive but critical, as they would have to be held on tight to the enormously expensive racing tires the crew had bought. But that was when their monster became cranky again. It happened the day after they put the engine inside the car. This was to be a huge step towards completion. After weeks of working on the motor and the body separately, now the car would be getting its 700 horsepower plus heart. Didn't they already turn the car on and it ran fine?
Yeah, I swear that they said that it was already working.
The engine went fine, but when they tried to put in the hood, it was a no-go. The supercharger they'd installed was just a little too big, and the hood they'd purchased a little too small. It just wouldn't close. This means it's going to get a sweet, intake thing on top.
Yes, of course it does.
They tried every adjustment that they could think of, including lowering a lot of the gear sitting on top of the engine, but it was futile. The fucking hood just would not fit. Of all the things to go wrong, they never saw this one coming.
Great F-bomb there. Just, great use of craft and language all around.
Now what? They waited 4 weeks for the custom-made hood to arrive. You think they would measure a little more carefully if that was the
Just
case.
as it was custom made, this is exactly the problem it's attempting to avoid.
They couldn't bear waiting another month for a new one, even if they could find one to fit. So Joe Peck and Finn went back to their mad scientist mode, this time with Toby helping out. It took 24 hours straight of hard work, but they fashioned a completely new hood, once again from carbon fiber, making it sleek and workable. It was then that Toby thought, maybe we're actually getting good at this. Everything ran smoothly after that, at least for a while. This has been 10 pages of, this went good, but it actually went bad, but then we figured it out through science.
And it's been 10 pages of them doing absolutely nothing but work on cars and descend into that. It's eventually going to...
this is just going to be a montage. It's going to be 30 seconds.
And the film is going to be a montage, but maybe it's the beginning of a plot about the need for unions for garage workers, I don't know.
Or that, actual, internationally renowned manufacturing shops are just giant scams. Because you could do this yourself. It just takes, 24 hours of work. The electrical system went in with no problems. The same was true for the fuel lines, the wiring harness, and the cooling system. How many things do you have to put in a car?
To be fair, they are fairly complicated.
There's a happy day when all 5 of them pitched in to mask the car off for its primer coats. But then with Benny as the main artist spraying on its gleaming silver and blue finish. When Toby asked his gas for just how much the paint cost, Benny replied, only $1 gazillion. They're keeping hard and fast records, remember, because they don't want to get screwed over. So this actually cost $1 gazillion.
Only $1 gazillion.
Yep. But the results were worth it. Once put together and painted, the Mustang looked so sleek and aerodynamic, it seemed to be traveling 100 miles per hour, even as it was standing still. They brought in a chassis dyno and programmed the FMU computer with software to maximize horsepower and torque. The program recommended ways they could get additional horsepower. They made these adjustments and were floored when the computer told them they were now in the area of 900 horsepower, which had been their holy grail since the beginning. They finally celebrated that night. Before this, they had banned all beer, all booze, and all kinds of other recreational distractions that might interfere with the project. This milestone called for at least a case of beer. They were very close to finishing this awesome car. Something started by the godfather of it all. And they had done it all in secret, off the radar, with no interference from Dino, who never once contacted them during the building process. With no break-ins, no fistfights, no tantrums. This whole book's been a tantrum. Then, as one of the final elements, they weighed the car. The dyno program had mandated that it had to be less than 3,800 pounds, not including the weight of the driver, to get to that hallowed 230 horsepower. When they put it on the scale, they discovered it weighed 71 pounds over that magical 3,800 number. This was a real problem. They had been economical weight-wise when deciding what to put in their super engine. Now it was so tight that anything they took off would have an undue effect on something else.
So they called Dino and asked him if it was okay, and they had a reasonable discussion about the contracts.
With
right?
that came the danger that the whole thing would snowball into negative territory.
God.
It all came down to numbers. If they wanted the 900 horsepower to reach the mythical speed of 230, you've already said there's a better speed than that. They needed to lose 71 pounds, but where? It was little Pete who unwittingly came up with the solution. He had been climbing around the back seat of the car, trying to find something they could jettison to make it lighter, when he happened to say, this back seat is so small, even I'd have a hard time getting into it. Or getting laid in it. Oh, that's classy, little Pete. It hit them all at once. Why did a car like this even need a back seat? It wasn't like it was going to be used for double dates. It took them another 24 hours to take out the back seat, along with all its braces and the heavy floorboard it had been sitting on. But once they filled in the empty space with yet more carbon fiber sheets, they weighed the car and it came in at 3,794 pounds. Man. The man's mind. That's editorializing.
Okay.
It would have been pretty good. This book is not good enough to say that. The dyno computer program loved the result. They ran the program 3 times, and each time it indicated that if everything stayed the same, they would have their 230 miles per hour once the car made it out of the road. When they opened the doors to the garage that morning, it was barely 5 a.m. Still, they rustled up some more beer and bought breakfast sandwiches from McDonald's to really celebrate.
These just.
I mean, I like a McGriddle as much as the next guy. I'm not gonna lie, but come on.
They're just like 17-year-olds.
Go to Denny's, get a Grand Slam. These
are 17-year-olds here, right here. They've sound like they've just discovered alcohol as a thing, and they've just discovered cars, and they've doubled down on both.
But when they sat down in the squeaky office chairs for their congratulatory breakfast, each one of them leaned back just to clear his head and wound up falling asleep. The sandwiches grew cold, and the beer got warm, but it didn't matter. The weeks of work, the long nights, looking up from the welding machine to see the sun rising, trash cans full of empty energy drink cans and power bar wrappers. Their work was done, and finally, they could rest.
My God.
Part 3.
When they woke up, little Pete had died!
Part 3.
Oh, that's the whole part?
Yeah, that's a whole part.
Could perhaps they not have cut that? That entire part?
5. Manhattan was glowing brighter than the fantastic city of Oz. Lights, building, people, cars, movement everywhere. The center of the universe, all less than an hour's drive from Mount Kisco. While it might have seemed a million miles away for some residents of that small upstate town, at least a handful of them had made the trip down here tonight. On the corner of West 51st Street and 6th Avenue, its entrance practically hidden by 2 empty storefronts, there was an art gallery that was so exclusive, so upper end, it didn't even have a name. It was meant to be a magical place, designed to instill wonder and awe, and when all the bells and whistles were in gear, for the most part, it worked. For the most part. That left corner is shit, but most of it's really good. Like, truly magical. The high walls, the subtle lighting, the muted tones, the barely perceptible pulsing soundtrack. On special nights, a very fine mist would be released from the ceiling and would very gently rain down onto the gallery, because that's good for art.
That sounds
it's to
like
spray water on it.
a problem they should get checked out. They should call up their landlord.
It gave everything a golden sheen without getting anything wet. The droplets like little pieces of jewelry falling from the sky, or at least from the rafters.
No, I think that's actually getting them wet. That's someone's peeing on all their art.
This was one of those special nights.
Okay.
The no-name space was filled to capacity. Several hundred New York City's rich and powerful were rubbing elbows and drinking gold champagne. An invitation to this happening had been extremely hard to get. Other events in the city this night paled in comparison. At the stroke of midnight, those attending had their attention steered to the fantastic 3D holographic program projected in the center of the room. Through spinning, moving drawings of mechanical designs and schematics, they were presented with inner workings of the last Shelby Mustang come to life. The engine, the chassis, the interior, the wheels, each component had not just been designed, the ghostly embodied narration claimed, but had been hand sculpted in a way to fit together all together perfectly. And many of them were parts that were built only to exist within this fantastic machine alone, never to be made again. Many Bothans died to bring you this information.
Nice, on cue there. Well done.
Those gathered were appropriately enthralled, but there was more. When the narration concluded, the holograph began to spinning faster, and suddenly it was like something ethereal was being born right before their eyes.
I like the
This
way...
birth was represented by the image of a galloping stallion slowly transforming itself into the Mustang-inspired supercar. The crowd applauded lustily, but still the best was yet to come. At the same moment the horse morphed into the 3D car, a curtain lifted, a fanfare came from nowhere, and suddenly before their eyes was the magical car itself, the last Shelby Mustang. The full supercar GT, displayed like a work of art surrounded by plush velvet ropes. Paparazzi camera flashes lit up the crowded room. The strobes of bright light bounced off the descending mist, now transforming them into millions of tiny emeralds floating down, silently cascading onto the Mustang below. It was like a psychedelic experience without the drugs. Tended, the crowd was beside itself with wonder.
Are they really
Okay, I wanted to finish that section.
Okay, are they really at an exclusive art club, or are they just at a press conference?
I mean, it's not actually an art crowd, because they wouldn't do that.
I like the way that their only two choices are either let's go to the Applebee's and McDonald's, or let's go to the best undercover no-name club, so exclusive thing in the entirety of New York City. There is no middle ground.
I would let them put a fucking car display in their thing. Like, come on.
Also, if it is this really ridiculous exclusive club, would they really be impressed by, I guess that's the car? Well done.
Or the people who care about the car would be like, oh, this art gallery, what are we doing in here?
Yeah. Oh man, if we get a scene of Toby Marshall and all his friends, like, what is this art?
Like someone walks by with a champagne tray.
Yeah, well, that's already happened in Fast and Furious, so great.
You're right, but Tyrese loves that stuff, so that's fine.
That's true. Yeah, they did it good. They handled that scene very well.
In one corner of the room, though, looking very out of place and by no means caught up in the wonderfulness of it all, were Joe Peck and Finn.
Okay, yeah, right. On point.
Both were dressed up, sort of. Peck was wearing an overly large jacket, a too tight dress shirt, and even a tie, though its knot was done all wrong. Finn looked no better. He borrowed a suit from a cousin, who obviously hadn't bought a suit since the mid-'80s. He and Joe had spent an hour before the show figured out how to remove its massive shoulder pads without tearing any of the outer material. Dude, they just are Velcroed in. Like, it's not a big deal.
Man, this really was written by someone too old to be writing this book. Since
Or
the
someone to know how things actually worked back then.
But also, like, the mid-'80s is the kind of reference you would put if you were writing a book in 2001, not in 2014, where you would have to be borrowing a suit from a 50-year-old man at this point.
I didn't even think about that. They were extremely uncomfortable. Manhattan was like another world to them. It was a big, noisy, expensive place that they'd never had any reason to go to, grand as it seemed to be. As soon as they stepped off the Metro North train at Penn Station earlier that day, both of them would have been given anything to be somewhere else. Toby and Little Pete weren't faring much better. They were standing next to the velvet ropes surrounding the supercar, also dressed in ill-fitting suits, a sea of beautiful people swirling around them. To them, the guests were like a different kind of species altogether, graceful and flowing, but plastic. And no matter what Toby and Pete did, no matter how they stood or how they talked, they just couldn't blend in. They were sticking out like sore thumbs. Today in particular felt out of place and lost. Oh, Toby in particular. Today. I read that as today. This is going bad. While he was proud of what they'd done with the Super Mustang, this was not his turf. This was where Anita lived, and that alone filled him with negative, brooding thoughts. 8 million people called New York City home, but it was knowing that just one of them was here, within the city limits, and maybe even close by, that was enough to dishearten him. Toby is the worst.
Toby really is the worst. Jesus Christ.
He was so low that even at this very moment his supercar was being introduced, self-fucking never felt so alone. But then he met Julia. When Toby first spotted her walking across the room toward him, it was suddenly like she was the only person in the room who was in color. Everyone else had turned to black and white. She was beautiful, blonde, well-dressed, and she moved with such confidence and grace that in itself was a thing of beauty. She reached the spot where they were standing, gave them both a visual going over, and then asked, "So, this car, how fast does it go?" Her accent was British and very sexy.
I can confirm.
Fast, Toby replied, just barely croaking out the word. Very fast, little Pete added. But the beauty was skeptical. It showed on her face, and especially on her lips. Aren't Mustangs fast? She asked. This car was built by Ford, Pete said, recalling words from the gallery's press conference, and reimagined by Carroll Shelby. There was a break in the line there, and I just read his Carroll Shelby, which would be a way better name for a car manufacturer. The greatest performance car builder in American history. But Pete, Toby interrupted with a smirk, that means nothing to her. Can't you tell? She's not from around here, and I doubt that she has any idea who Mr. Shelby is.
I hope she has a Newcastle accent in the film.
What is that? I don't know what that implies.
In Britain, they'll be like, oh, I can't do a Newcastle accent. Like it's like Anton Deck. If anyone outside of England has heard of Anton Deck,
I have no idea who that is.
Okay. It's like this, you know. No, that's a town. I'm not gonna. That's the worst. I can't. It's an accent.
But it's one of the goofy ones that are charmed.
It's the
are
north.
never in movies.
It's like really near Scotland.
Okay, cool. So a good one. No,
Yeah.
she's just gonna be super posh like every other British person.
No, man. Maybe she has a really bit of thick West Country accent.
Which one's that?
Hot Fuzz.
Oh, okay. No, that happened.
She's from Somerset.
You know what? I'm gonna stop a second. I'm gonna look up who plays Julia.
Okay.
How about that?
So we can find out the accent news. I hope in the film really everything does go to black and white.
I do that.
Like
That's
it-
like some Scott Pilgrim shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, shit, this is just Scott Pilgrim.
Imogen Poots plays Julia.
Okay.
So that's sad.
Is she British?
Yeah.
Okay. What's she been in? And I recognise her name.
V for Vendetta, 28 Weeks Later,
No.
Me and Orson Welles.
Have that. Haven't seen it.
The Jane Eyre from 2011.
No.
That Fright Night remake.
No.
Like nothing like super big. I just know of her. She was born in London, so
She will have a British voice.
she was raised in Chiswick.
Oh, Chiswick. That's in London.
Okay, I didn't know.
That's where Donna. That's where Donna
It's
comes
spelled
from.
Chiswick.
That's where Donna comes from,
Drivers
Doctor
out
Who.
there that if you want to
Okay.
show off your air
Cool.
skills, you gotta look
All
out
right,
for those
learn
little
something every day.
jumps that might add a bit of spice.
Where was he going? Oh, he was assuming she didn't know shit because she's foreign.
Oh, Toby was being the worst again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pete thought a moment, but then concluded boastfully, "Well, we finished it. Our shop was the one that made the supercar out of it." "Why is it so fast, though?" Julia shot back at him. Pete smiled and went off script. 900 horsepower, baby, he said. Pure stroke and power. Toby had to laugh at little Pete's exuberance. His little brother. Little Pete is so dead. Just so dead.
Right?
But she still she was not impressed.
I
Is
assume
that a
the next
lot?
line is
She
going to
asked.
be her just spitting out hard car knowledge and
900 horsepower, I mean? Little Pete couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Are you kidding?" he asked her. Toby intervened again. "Relax, Pete," he said. He turned to the pretty blonde. "Miss, this isn't a car you buy at the mall," he said. Because apparently at this place you buy cars at malls.
Surely the only cars you can buy at malls are those ridiculously expensive cars they sometimes have at, like, you know, we put a Mercedes in the middle of this mall.
That's
for
fair.
show.
I mean, that actually doesn't happen. Like, I feel like that only happened in like contests in the 90s.
That's true. But I've never seen any, I've never seen a hatchback in a mall. That I've seen less.
I mean, I parked my hatchback at the mall, so there's that.
I mean, yeah. That's a car you can steal from the car park at the mall. And then
Trust me when I say it's one of a kind.
she
she still
replied,
seemed
"No,
confused.
shopping center, please."
Can I see the engine? She asked innocently. Little Pete popped the hood with pleasure. Toby raised it so she could see beneath. Huh, she said, studying the engine closely. 5.8 liter, aluminum block, supercharger, racing headers. Nice, actually. Little Pete just stared at her. He was speechless. Toby, though, was smiling. Gotta admit, he said to her, I wasn't expecting that. Well, we were. So...
You mean, yeah, they literally could not have gone any other way.
She moved just a bit closer to him. From a woman, you mean? She asked. Or is it because I'm British? Mr. Shelby's first Cobra was built using a car called an AC Ace Bristol, manufactured in England. But you knew that, right? Toby felt speechless. There was nothing he could say to her at this moment that would have made any sense. Life can be full of surprises, she said. She told him with a wink. Little Pete piped up again. I find life to be full of people who think they're smart just because they have a British accent. She turned toward him. Is that right? She asked. You ever watch Piers Morgan? He asked back.
Oh, God!
I mean, I appreciate getting to dig in at that bastard, but come on.
Yeah.
Little Pete is not the kind of guy who would watch Piers Morgan and think, this guy's full of shit. Like, he would totally be into it.
He'd be like, this guy's smart, he has a British accent.
Yep. She giggled, just a little, then turned back to Toby. Is this how you guys do it, she asked. Is that your act? You're kind of tough and quiet, and he cracks the jokes. I like Julia. She's not taking any of this shit. Of course, she's going to fall for him because this is a movie.
Yes, no, she's responding to their shit by flirting with him, so...
Watch out for the
Again,
person who
Toby was at a
throws
loss
man
for
as a
words.
free
It
burning
didn't help
down
that he
there,
just
I
couldn't
said.
stop staring at her. I
You
read
see
this
it,
as just
shut
total
it down and
sarcasm.
add it to your car.
Not for flirting, but I bet that's how it's going to be portrayed.
But yes, much like how we read
You can
Dino
run,
in the
but you
first
can't
part,
hide. When you're the
I'm
marshal,
sure the
your best
movie
hope is a fast
will
car and an
have
auto
no
repair
irony
around the
where we
corner.
see all irony.
Oh, just wait. Our best bud is about to come back. The hero's about to arrive.
Oh, yeah.
But then a dark shadow appeared over them. The lights in the hall seemed to go dim. The cascading emerald mist lost its glow. Suddenly, Dino Brewster was there, injecting himself into the conversation.
Hi, he said.
Hi, Julia, he said.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
I can't deal with this.
That line. Shit. Hi. How unforgivable.
Shut up. Never get this read if you do this. Toby's
Race
heart
101
plunged to his
north the
shoes.
Crystal Summit Observatory.
World would these two know each other? 3 million is way too much for this car, Dino, Julia told him directly. But that's what it cost, Dino replied. Let's see what Ingram thinks. I am what Ingram thinks, she insisted. And Ingram thinks it's worth 2 million at the most. Dino shook his head. Sorry, 3 million is the number. But 3 is absurd, she said, and everyone here knows it. They love the presentation, but why do you think nobody's bid on it yet? Dino didn't miss a beat. There's still plenty of time for that. Plus, it's the best car I've driven since Indy. But then Pete interrupted again. He saw a wrong and had to right it. That's just the way it was. You've never driven this car, he told Dino dismissively. Toby's had the keys this whole time. Julia smirked. You want me to plug my ears and turn around while you guys get on the same page? Little Pete laughed at her joke, but Dino was staring daggers at him. She still continued her assault. What's the top speed? She asked Dino directly. 180, Dino replied. But Toby answered at the exact same moment, except he said 230. She looked authentically surprised. 230 miles per hour? No, kilometers, but you know. Just trying to translate that to British for you.
Yeah, no, British and miles an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
We are in metric in most things except miles and also pints of milk.
Weird.
Yeah. Was still...
It's stone, because nobody uses stone but the British. Is that still a thing people use? Or is that just old
Race
people?
southeast to the
Like
naval
stone
yard.
is a weight of measurement.
For what? For how heavy you are?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone's measuring stones.
That's weird. I don't even know what a stone is. It's a lot, right?
I like a person's like 10 stone, I guess.
Okay, so a stone is a big number
Yes.
compared to like a pound, which is not a big number,
It's
or a
12
kilogram,
pounds,
which
I
is
think.
not a big number.
I think it's 12 pounds. I don't know. It's an amount of pounds.
Okay. All our measurement talk here at Abnormal Mapping.
I don't think this book is ever going to top. Hello. Said Dino.
Dino tried to explain. He's talking about a theoretical top speed, he said rather desperately. She pointed to Toby. I know he doesn't really talk much, she said, but let's see if Mr. Strong and Silent can be less silent. Should go 230, Toby said simply. But the top NASCAR speed ever was 228, she told him. This car is faster, Toby replied calmly. Finally, she stopped talking for a moment. A wide smile lit up her face. Okay, she said. 8 o'clock tomorrow up in your neck of the woods at Shepperton. You get anything close to 230 out of this car, Ingram will buy it on the spot. Suddenly, Dino was excited again. For $3 million? Julia giggled again. Give or take $1 million, she said. Mostly take. With that, she walked away. I'm done liking Julia. She kind of sucks.
Yeah.
All three of them watched her go, but Dino was fuming. 230, he growled at Toby once she was out of earshot. Are you crazy? What if I can't get the car up to that speed? You can't, Toby told him simply, but I can, so I'll drive. Dino could barely control his anger. All their collaboration to create the Super Shelby had been a success, mostly because Dino hadn't interfered with the building process. Ever since the project had been completed, he'd been the same old Dino. Asshole, douchebag, tool. Dino is mad because he almost fucked up this sale. Like, what?
Yeah, Dino.
I feel like Dino was totally in the right here.
I am a professional. I'm trying to sell this. I hired you to make the thing. Please.
And you're done. Like, you made the thing. Good job. You get your money. Go the fuck home.
Even if I do this wrong, I'm doing this. This is me. It's my reputation on the line here. Go run your business.
Yeah, which I've just saved, so you don't have to be super proud and demand that you drive the goddamn car.
How long till? So, how many pages till Dino actually becomes evil, and we can no longer read him in this light?
Shortly, I'm sure. Oh, next line. As proof of this, in a low, threatening voice, he said to Toby,
northwest
"Don't
to the
ever
wind
even
farm."
think about driving that car, and I mean ever."
Yep. Damn it.
6. A good example of just how affluent some of the Mount Kisco area were would be found in the 10 miles east of town. It was called the Shepperton Motor Club, but essentially it was a private racetrack. While its owners were always quick to point out that it was more than just a place for the mega rich to race their mega expensive cars.
No, like double use of mega there. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, your idea about this being written by someone in their 40s makes perfect sense now. Obviously, it has to be. No one would use mega like that.
No.
It was also a resort, training ground, and a retreat. The truth was, in these things, size mattered, and Shepperton was nearly twice the size of any Mount Kisco County country club, that rat trap closer to town. In addition to all these other amenities, Shepperton boasted a 4.2-mile racetrack that snaked its way through 175 acres of strategically placed woods, finely mowed lawns, and low grassy shoulders. It featured many grand corners, built with the great European tracks in mind, and had more than 1.5 miles of straightaways, 400 feet of elevation changes, and 22 turns, including 3 hairpins. Membership there was ultra exclusive. Only about 1% of the 1% could get in.
Aye.
And the dues ran into the high 6 figures. Anyone owning that would be considered less than the typical supercar, would be best off trying to get their kicks someplace else. This is why Toby, despite his love for all things cars and racing, had never been past its gates. Until now. The day had dawned bright and fiery, covering the private racetrack with blood-red colors. Toby and Little Pete were the first to arrive. Passing through the security check as invited members of Dino Brewster, they drove slowly up the winding road leading to the main field. "I've died and gone to heaven," Little Pete whispered on seeing the facilities,
No, that's later.
which including rows of well-maintained private garages, equipment buildings, and fuel houses. "I've always wondered what this place looked like up close." "Me too," Toby sighed. They rolled the Mustang off the flatbed truck, handling it with the utmost care. Once done, they both took a good look around. Where is everybody? Pete said, checking the time. I guess we're early, Toby said. He was glad for this. He wanted some time to think about what would come next. He walked over to the Mustang and ran his hand along its roofline. He knew every inch of the supercar, every part, every gasket, every nut, screw, and bolt. The Super Mustang really was a work of art. He was proud of it, and proud of the Marshall team for doing such a great job. Then he looked out into the track. It was untouched so far for the day, glistening, inviting, dewdrop perfect. Little Pete knew Toby well. He studied his friend as Toby took turns admiring the car and then glancing out onto the empty racetrack. Pete could almost hear the wheels spinning in Toby's head. He knew what he was thinking. Toby, he said to him. Toby? But little Pete didn't reply. So little Pete walked up beside him and looked out on the track as well. Then he said, "You've got to do it, bro." Not a minute later, Toby was behind the wheel of the Shelby Mustang, tearing around the racetrack. He went through the first big... No one's here yet. He went through the first big turn at 180 miles per hour, but that was just the beginning. He and his car were just warming up. He shifted up to 6th gear, came out of the turn, and stomped on the accelerator. The speedometer began climbing. 190, 200, 210. A moment later, he was rocketing down the first straightaway at an ungodly speed. Exactly what the supercar had been designed to do. Now it was up to him to prove its claims were true. He went into the next turn, high on the bank. That cost him a few extra moments to take the longer line. That didn't bother him. This was all about building speed. Coming off the high bank, he would achieve a slingshot effect, or so he hoped. He needed all the velocity he could get so he could crank the Mustang up to the magic 230 on the next straightaway before he ran out of road again. If he he should slingshot and go back in time. That's what this should be about.
Yes, he slingshots around the sun.
He goes back to the 80s.
He's back to the 80s.
Double goddamn on you, or whatever.
Double dumbass.
Yep. Okay, that's what it is. You knew what the call out was.
I knew what the call out was.
Okay. Where was I? All these numbers. Little Pete was standing alone in the pits near the high turn. Toby caught a glimpse of it in the microsecond it took to go by. He just barely saw that Pete had his hands up to his ears, trying to block out the noise of the Super Mustang's super engine.
Oh, not the Mega Mustang's Mega engine.
Well, it's it's had a little wear and tear now. They put it on the road. It depreciates, not just super. That's a good sign, he thought. Then Toby hit the straightaway and put one eye on his speedometer. They forgot to put a muffler on. That's what this is. In that big long list, I don't remember there being a muffler.
Twisted metal and shattered glass.
It began to creep
Sounds like
above
we got a road
220,
rage on our hands.
222,
Watch out for vehicles driving
223.
erratically in your rearview
Back in the
mirror.
pits,
If you
little Pete had
spot
taken
them,
his hands away from his ears, only to hear someone screaming. He turned to see Dino running towards him like a madman. He was pointing wildly at the Mustang as it rocketed around the next turn. "Stop him!" Dino was screaming at Pete. "God damn it, stop him!" 2 minutes later, Toby pulled into the pit area and climbed out of the Mustang. He was smiling broadly, a rarity. But then Dino appeared and his smile was gone. "What the fuck are you doing, Marshall?" Dino screamed at him. "You don't own the car. You don't get to joyride in it." Toby kept his cool. He just walked away from him. "Top speed is a little over 230, he called out over his shoulder to Dino. "We did it." But Dino wasn't really listening. He grabbed Toby, his fist reared back, ready to punch him, but Toby was much quicker. He caught Dino's arm and held it firm, making any punch impossible. Still, they were just seconds away from a major brawl. Suddenly, a female voice rose above the fray. According to this, the voice said. It was enough to freeze Dino and Toby in place. They looked up to see Julia, as beautiful as ever, holding up her radar gun. According to this, she said again, "It's true. Toby hit 230. A man in an expensive suit was standing next to her. He had binoculars around his neck. He was Mark Ingram, filthy rich, playboyish, a ranking member at Shepperton, and the owner of many high-performance cars. That was some driving, son," Ingram said to Toby, "and that's one hell of a car." He looked at the Super Mustang again, and then back at the small group in the pits. "And it's going to cost me $3 million, he asked. Dino looked up over at Julia and then back at Ingram. "Yes, sir," Dino said, "it is." 2.7, Julia piped up. Dino looked back at her with dark eyes, but she had no problem staring him down. Ingram broke the stalemate. "If Julia says it's worth 2.7, he'll say, I'll pay 2.7. Take it or leave it." It was official just a few minutes later. Ingram wrote Dino a check for $2.7 million without blinking an eye. Then, to celebrate his purchase, he put on a racing helmet, got behind the wheel of the Mustang, and roared away. This weird Monopoly man just jumping into his car. It's the best thing in the world. Why is that not this movie? Like, that would be way better. I want to look up who plays this guy if they say. They don't. He's not important enough.
In the chat,
I hope it's something cool.
In the chat, Destiny says Apple Bros. So that's pretty great. I had to inform you of that bit of wordplay right there.
Okay. This should have been a special moment for all involved, but Dino ruined that. He was still ready to kill Toby.
It's his car! Okay, he said don't get in the car. In a bad way, we know. But to be fair, he did say don't get in the car, please. Well, not please.
What the hell were you thinking? He half screamed at him again. If you had wrecked the car or blown the engine or anything, this whole deal would have been fucked. Toby remained cool. But none of that happened, he replied casually. And we sold the car, didn't we? I thought that was the whole point. But then little Pete butted in. You never could have gotten that car to 230, even on a track. Only Toby could do it, and that's why the guy bought it. But Dino was still glaring at Toby. This wasn't about money. This was about ego, and Dino's was supersized. You think you're a better driver than me, Marshall? He hissed at Toby. But before Toby could reply, little Pete butted in again. I know he's a better driver than you, he told Dino. Dino suddenly turned on little Pete. You know, I'm about done with you, he said angrily, taking a step in Pete's direction. Toby was immediately in Dino's face. Back off, Dino, he warned him. But Dino would not relent. He was fuming. I'll beat you on the road, he seethed at Toby, on a track, on the dirt, or anywhere else you want to race. You name it, Marshall. But little Pete laughed in Dino's face. Last time I checked, he said, Toby beat you every time he raced in high school. Well, a lot's happened since high school, little man, Dino spat back at him. Little Pete straightened up to his full diminutive height, but Toby interceded again. He was trying hard to play peacemaker. You're the man, he told Dino. You're the pro, okay? You got nothing to prove on me, so let's just move on. But Dino was not buying it. The veins in his head looked like they were all going to pop. No, he said, let's race. If you win, I'll give you my 75% cut of the Mustang deal. You lose, you give me your 25%. Toby froze. The prospects of such big money gave him pause and stopped him from thinking clearly, at least for the moment. He couldn't help it. 2.7 million? That kind of money could change everything for him. Well, he said, that would make it interesting. Before he could say another word, Dino told him, I'll pick you guys up at your shop, 4 o'clock. Just be ready. With that, Dino stormed away. But Toby was confused. What are we racing? He called after Dino. And where? But Dino never replied.
Dino has turned into a completely different character.
Yep, pretty much.
Like, at one point he was like just angry because he was racing, and now he's just been, just in a second, just completely changed to generic villain man.
Well, you know, the plot needed to happen. We're almost halfway through this.
The whole book, we're almost halfway through the book.
We're on page 105.
Has the plot started yet?
Thing that's on the back, which is that whole, like, being framed for murder thing, has not happened yet.
What the hell is this movie?
We got 40 pages to go. It happened. I know it happens in this section, so...
Okay. Yes, because yes, you told me that.
Yep. The most expensive house inside the Mount Kisco city limits was an enormous Tudor-style mansion located on the east side gated community known as Guard Hill. Good to know. It was late afternoon when the black Mercedes sedan sped past its mansion's wrought iron gates and roared up the long driveway that led to the grand home. No sooner had the Mercedes stopped at the front door than little Pete excitedly jumped out of the back seat. Dino and Toby climbed out of the front seats with somewhat less enthusiasm and joined him. That's the biggest house I've ever seen, little Pete exclaimed. It's my uncle's place, Dino said. He's in Monaco or someplace. Toby and Pete continued to gape at the mansion. As with the Shepperton Motor Club, they had heard of this place, but had never gotten any closer to it than driving by the front gate. Dino noted their fascination and was ready to take advantage of it. He put on a pair of leather driving gloves he'd taken from his pocket, then pushed them along. Come on, he told them, I want to show you something. Dino had been virtually silent since picking them up. Toby didn't know what he was up to exactly. They followed him around the side of the mansion and up to the pristine parking garage. It was almost as impressive as the main house. Get ready to piss your pants, Dino told them. He dramatically pushed a button on the side of the building, and 3 garage doors opened automatically. Inside, sitting in separate bays, were 3 of the most fantastic cars Toby had ever seen. There was the Koenigsegg? There's a lot of G's in that word.
Oh, the Koenigsegg.
The Koenigsegg Egeros, designed and built in Sweden. They were aptly known as hypercars. Oh. In quotes. In quotes.
Okay. Wait, so
it's super and then mega and then hyper. I think that's the hierarchy, right?
No, I would put hyper below mega.
Really? I wouldn't. I mean, these are actual real supercars. I mean, in real life, compared to that Mustang. So
you're right. Well, it was never described as a mega car, though. If it was
the Mustang,
mega rich, then mega something.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Huh.
All I know is the Mega is the top form of the Digimon.
I think Hyper is better than Mega.
Okay. Yeah, yes, sure.
They don't call it Mega Speed.
That is
or
true.
Mega Drive. I mean, there is a Mega Drive, but that's a whole
call it
thing.
Mega Drive. Yeah, but if they did...
Ultra sleek and very low to the ground. They look like they'd been conceived by someone 100 years in the future, or perhaps an ET, a wealthy ET. Extremely ET, no periods, like just ET. Weird.
ET is my rap name.
Oh, so just the guy from Spring Breakers, Alien.
Yes, his album Wealthy ET.
Extremely rare and extremely expensive. Their tires alone cost tens of thousands of dollars. With modifications, a complete racing car would run more than $4 million. If he's got like 3 of these $4 million cars, why does he care about this dumb like $2 million sale?
I don't know.
The mansion was past history to Toby and little Pete now. They'd only heard of these incredible cars and seen photographs. They don't have YouTube in the sticks. To be in their presence was almost overwhelming. These aren't even legal in the United States, Dino told them. They've got no registration, no plates, so technically they don't exist. Toby didn't want to believe what he thought was happening. Why are you showing these to us? He asked Dino. Just to prove your family has money? Dino just laughed at them. No, you hick, he said. These are what we're going to race in. Winner takes the $2.7 million. And there's 3 of them, Pete said, still awestruck. This is what the real pros drive, Dino went on.
Little Pete's about to die.
I think so. 0 to 120 in 8 seconds. Top speed. Well, who knows? Are you afraid of that much power, Marshall? Pete laughed at the comment. But Dino, he said, I thought you didn't go faster than 180. Dino finally snapped. He grabbed little Pete by the jacket and roughly pulled him over. You got a big mouth for someone who's just a fan, he growled at Pete. And let me race, Pete spat right back at him. Once again, Toby had to step in. He pulled the 2 competitors apart. Okay, happy to have you, Petey, Dino said. Like you said, we've got 3 cars, so one of them is for you. Yeah, you're totally right. He is totally dead.
He is dead in this chapter. And that's who he's framed for murder. There we go.
Little Pete couldn't believe it. Awesome, he shouted. I'm in. But Toby didn't. These cars are way out of their league, Dino included. And while he knew he'd have to go up against his rival, if not for the $2.7 million, then only to shut him up, involving Pete in the race sounded a little too dangerous. It's better if you sit this one out, Toby told his friends. The other guys would never believe you did it anyway. But Dino laughed darkly. Let him be a big boy to match his big mouth, he told Toby, pointing to the 3 cars. We got 3 identical Agueras. It's an even playing field, so let's do it.
Why would you buy 3 identical of the same color?
No idea. I see different colors because it's a movie. You got to make them different colors, or people aren't gonna know.
I hope they're all just gray.
Toby was still trying to process just what kind of insanity was taking place. He had no idea this is what Dino had in mind. Dino held out a hat. It contained 3 sets of keys. What does it matter if they're identical? Which key you pick? Finish line is the end of the bridge over Route 684, he told them. It should be lit up by the time we get there. Little Pete reached out of the hat and pulled out a key. Dino drew next, then Toby. Dino excitedly pointed his key toward the Koenigsegg's, and one on the end lit up. He hustled over to it. Toby was right on his heels. He said to Pete, listen to me. Don't mess with him. Let me race him. You stay out of it and just go for a nice ride. But Pete just shook his head. Relax, Toby, he said. You know I'm a good driver. I got this. But Toby was still concerned for his friend. You gotta go easy, he warned him. Your Camaro has what? 480 horse? This thing has like 950. Dino interrupted. More like 1140, he said. The was me. That's editorializing again, but I like it better. Hopping up from the back of the seat. No.
Yeah.
Toby shook his head again. Even though the idea of racing a car with that much horsepower excited him to no end, he was getting a bad feeling about this.
Hey!
But then Pete turned back to him. This is my vision, bro, he said. This is how I saw you winning the De Leon. You beat Dino. You take his car and win. Plus, if we both beat him, he'll have to move out of the country or something. Like, they're not racing for slips, dude. Toby smiled. He really loved his little brothers in quotes, by the way. And it was hard to argue with him. Okay, but just play it smart, he told Pete. Pete gave him a thumbs up and then jumped into his hypercar. Time to rock and roll, he yelled.
God.
Intersections of Route 76 and 184 was about a mile outside downtown Mount Kisco. It was the crossing of two little-used roads. I feel like every road is little used in Mount Kisco. And one of the many locals used to get onto Interstate 684. Oh, that's why the interstate came through. That's how it happens. It was late afternoon now and quiet. A car was stopped at the intersection waiting for the light to change. Meanwhile, another car was approaching from Route 184, traveling in the slow lane. If one car traveled at 55 miles per hour and another car traveling perpendicular travels at 45 miles per hour, when do they meet? I hate these dumb math problems car descriptions. They're the worst.
Yeah.
Suddenly, a loud roar shattered the peaceful scene. The peaceful scene of two people at an intersection. A second later, Dino's Koenigsegg appeared out of nowhere. It squealed into the intersection, causing a storm of dust and exhaust, violently drifting sideways and perfectly splitting the two civilian cars. I don't think these are drift cars. Also, your Rest in Pete, pretty good.
Yeah.
It sneezed into your pun skills. I think you are a monster.
Yep.
His sudden appearance caused one of the civilian cars to nearly clip his rear end at the same moment. And for the same reason, the second car slammed into the first, spinning it like a child's top and throwing it onto the median. Dino was able to avoid being caught up in the collision. He regained control of the Koenigsegg hypercar and pushed his accelerator to the floor.
Spinning it
His
like
engine
what?
screaming. What?
Spinning it like a what?
A top? A child's top?
Oh, a spinning top, not a child's top.
No, top.
Okay. Yeah. And I know what it means. It just sounds like he had nicked a child's t-shirt and was like mocking them with it. Like, yeah, I stole your shit.
I mean, that's pretty good. He just drove around in a hypercar stealing clothes off of children. Some weird mythical hobgoblin. Oh, the Dino Brewster's coming to town. You better hide up your kids. They'll steal all their clothing. His engine screaming, he rocketed away with just minimal damage to his left rear taillight. A split second later, little Pete roared into the intersection. Seeing the melee Dino had caused, he was forced to drift way out to avoid colliding with the two hapless civilian cars. His maneuver successful, he took off after Dino. Both Koenigsegg's now accelerated to 130 miles per hour and roared through the bending stretch of roadway with lakes on either side. Pete was barely able to contain himself. He was pressing the gas harder and harder, all the while shouting at the top of his lungs. He'd never driven anything even close to the Koenigsegg. For him, this was something from one of his visions. They flew by the civilian car doing the 55 mile per hour speed limit. It was as if it was standing still. Pete zoomed right up on Dino's bumper and was enjoying every second of it. Toby was following close behind. He'd fallen back intentionally so he could keep his eye on little Pete. As a result, he still had some ground to make up, but at the same time, he was only a few seconds behind both of them. You could just cross out both those sentences then. They cancel each other out.
Yeah. That's kind of the whole book, though. There was an entire part that was just... And then it was really bad, but then it was good, but then it was bad, but then it was good, but then it was bad, and then they had a car.
3 hypercars were now on a long, rolling part of the roadway, passing civilian vehicles like they were frozen in place. This book has a very loose, a sense of relativistic effects.
Yeah.
Like a painted car looks like it's going 100 miles per hour. These 55 mile per hour cars look like they're standing still.
There was that car that looked like it was going 100 miles per hour, even when it was standing still.
Yep. Zooming inside and outside on the shoulder one moment, skirting the median the next, the trio of Koenigsegg's were now doing 180 miles per hour. Okay, I've played Forza. I've never driven a hypercar, but I've played a lot of Forza. If you hit a median at 180 miles per hour, you are not surviving. Like, that car is going to flip.
Yeah.
Even in Burnout, you hit an elevation like that at that speed, you're not going to...
I am jumping around right now, and, yeah. You've got to keep things under control in Burnout. So this movie, less realistic than Burnout.
That's really sad. Suddenly, up ahead, a Chevy pickup truck came into view. Its elderly driver was barely going above the speed limit and was listening to his radio at high volume.
Is this Final Destination 2?
I imagine a bunch of jump cuts of like these screaming cars, and then just like this old man listening to country music as he plods along.
Yeah, and it'll be a longer shot as he's in his car going. Yeah, I've seen this before.
Here we go. Here's the comedy beat on this. But when he glanced into his rearview mirror, he did a double take. An instant later, Dino's Koenigsegg blew past him. The driver couldn't believe his eyes. The hypercar went by him in a flash. He looked at his own speed, just under 65 miles per hour. When he looked up again, Toby and Pete had roared by him as well. I feel like we just got more of this guy's interior life than most of the main characters in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, we have.
The three hypercars entered a dead straightaway. Dino was still in the lead, but Toby was right behind him with little Pete right on Toby's bumper. They flew over a crowd on the highway, each Koenigsegg going airborne for a moment before coming back to Earth. In front of them now, just a quarter mile away, was another intersection. At that moment, a large truck pulling a horse trailer was crossing through. The three Koenigsegg's were traveling in excess of 200 miles per hour now. At that speed, all three would hit the truck in 5 seconds.
Oh no.
The truck driver saw them coming. Not quite believing what was happening, he panicked and slammed on the brakes, blocking the intersection. Dino was the first to hit his own brakes, his Koenigsegg fishtailing wildly from side to side. Toby saw Dino's brake lights and reacted instantly, but he didn't hit his brakes. Rather, he laid on the accelerator and made an aggressive move around the truck. The maneuver avoided collision, but an instant later he found himself on the other side of the highway's median, going the wrong way and heading right into oncoming traffic.
Oh no.
Meanwhile, Dino was trying to get around the back end of the horse trailer, but little Pete was too close on his tail. They made a move at the same time, Dino's nose almost clipping little Pete's rear end. Little Pete reacted immediately, swerving wide. He avoided colliding with Dino, but he was suddenly spinning onto the grass. For that one long moment, little Pete came very close to losing it. But with another sharp turn of his wheel and a boot of the gas, he was quickly back onto the pavement and running straight again. All this bizarre high-speed maneuvering had put Toby in the lead, the only problem being he was traveling on the wrong side of the highway. He was mildly weaving back and forth, getting out of the way of oncoming trucks, cars, and vans, all while still going nearly 200 miles per hour. You make good boost doing that. You know.
I know. Yes, no.
You're doing that right now on the screen.
I am just making all that sweet boost.
Okay. All the while, he was desperately searching for an opening on the median, a spot where he could get back on the right side of the road. But the median strip was lined with trees, rocks, and bushes, and no openings. He had no choice but to press on in the wrong direction. Over on the right side of the road, and with very little traffic ahead of them, Dino and Pete had accelerated up to 210 miles per hour. This allowed both cars to gain serious ground on Toby. Realizing what was happening, Toby buried his gas pedal as well, but then he saw another car coming straight at him. The driver swerved before Toby could, crashing over the median strip. Immediately losing control in the high grass, the civilian slid through the clump of trees and right into the path of both Dino and Little Pete. Luckily, their instincts took over. Little Pete swerved into the careening car while Dino went to the outside. It was close, but their driving skills got them by the hapless driver in a flash. Toby's watching all this from the other side of the highway. Finally, he spotted an opening in the median strip ahead. With a quick jerk of his steering wheel, he slid through the gap and was suddenly back on the right side of the road. Another civilian had swerved to avoid Toby and was now right in Little Pete's path. Little Pete went left and got around the car, but then it moved over and went right into Dino's path. Dino hit the brakes again, swerving wildly to the right. He avoided a collision. When the smoke cleared, he found himself in last place, looking at the butt ends of Toby and Little Pete's hypercars. They keep using that word!
Clearly, you know, they are hypercars, truly.
Just a second. I'm gonna... If there's a Wikipedia article for hypercar, I will stop making fun of the term.
There will be. Of course there will be.
Oh, there is!
There is, because what it is it's a marketing term created by people going, supercars aren't cool anymore, what can we convince rich people to buy? Hypercars. It is exactly the same as video games.
It is a theoretical high-concept car design in the mid-90s that doesn't actually exist.
Wait, that's actually what a hypercar is?
Yeah, it is a specific car. It's a concept car with aerodynamic body, composite materials, and a hybrid drive.
So the Koenigsegg, which is a real car that exists, not a hypercar.
Yep.
Continue to make fun of them.
Oh, here we go. The commercialization of the idea of the hypercar began in 2014 with the production of an all-carbon electric BMW i3 and the Volkswagen XL1. Those are the two.
I thought it was going to say, with the production of the movie Need for Speed.
That was great. So there are hypercars. This is not one of them. That term means something way more sedate than that.
Wait, when is this set?
This book?
This part? Because if he's going to go to prison in a bit,
Yeah.
when is it set at the moment?
I mean, Piers Morgan's on TV in the United States, so the last 2 years.
Last 2 years.
I feel like they said it was 2014, though.
They did, didn't they? Yes, they must have. So how far in the future does it... Okay, let's finish this chapter.
Just a second, I'm looking. Yeah, I thought there was a thing that said the date, and there isn't. Sorry. The three Koenigsegg's roared up to another intersection. This one was clear. With incredible precision, all three drifted onto Freedom Parkway. They were now in the final stretch of their race. The parkway was conveniently devoid of traffic. Up ahead, all three drivers could see a bridge lit up. They were roaring along now at their fastest speeds yet. Toby was in front, little Pete right on his bumper, with Dino riding Pete's bumper in turn. Maintaining this tight bunch, all three accelerated to an incredible 250 miles per hour. Which, I mean, that's that unreachable speed.
That is. No, isn't it 260 or 250?
It was 250.
They did it. Well done.
Yeah. I mean, movie's over. Let's go home.
Yeah, that's... Okay.
Little Pete looked up his rearview mirror to see Dino drafting off him. This told him Dino was about to make one last desperate move before the race was over and he'd lose $2 million. But Pete was ready for him. The bridge was right up ahead. Their speed was now more than 260 miles per hour. Suddenly, Dino made his move, trying to pass little Pete on the outside. If this doesn't, like, movie needs to end with them riding rocket ships at this point, I feel like.
Yeah, this movie actually has to have the end of Bayonetta.
Dino turns into, like, a space god, and then Toby has to ride a rocket into space to fight him.
God, I wish.
Oh, man. Could you imagine?
Yes!
Like, a 1,000-foot tall Dominic Cooper in space? Yes. I'd watch that movie in a heartbeat.
That's not what we're getting here.
But it was not a clean maneuver, and Dino violently clipped the back of Little Pete's car. Suddenly, Little Pete was airborne, and not by a few inches. All four of his tires left the ground, hurtling him 10 feet above the pavement. Still moving at tremendous speed, Pete landed hard, hitting the bridge's concrete foundation nose first. The impact caused the hypercar to begin a series of sickening cartwheels. Pete tumbled. If you hit the foundation nose first, you're not going to do cartwheels, you're done.
Is this Pete dead?
You're playing a game that has probably demonstrated this point again and again.
Many times. Your wheels need to hit the ground. That's the part of the car that you don't die.
Pete tumbled over and over, smashing through a light pole and then against a cement barrier. The multi-million-dollar car was disintegrating with each bounce, leaving a cloud of glass, metal, and rubber behind. Toby saw it all. Looking through his rearview mirror, he saw Pete's car, now in flames, careen off a bridge support, go clear over a railing, and disappear below.
But he was saved by a helicopter.
Toby stood on his brakes, spinning the steering wheel at the same time. He turned 180 degrees in an instant. He was just seconds from winning the brutal $2.7 million race, but suddenly all thoughts of the money were gone. I mean, you could pay for hospitals with that. You should keep going. He went back for Little Pete instead. As he did so, Dino blew right past him and crossed the other end of the bridge, winning the race. Toby was at the crash site in seconds. He jumped out of the Koenigsegg and slid down the 100 feet embankment to the edge of the river. Little Pete's car was there, but it was barely recognizable. It was upside down and being consumed in flames, its four wheels swaying as if suffered from compound fractures. Toby could see Little Pete inside, his lifeless body just barely visible through the fire.
God! Oh my God!
He tried to grab him, but the heat was too intense. He whipped off his jacket, putting it up to shield his face and hands, and tried again, and again, and again. Pete! Toby screamed from the depths of his soul. Jesus! Pete! But it was no good, and the flames were just too much. Okay, this is Need for Speed. The game series that's known for having licensed cars and thus not realistic crashes. The movie is going to depict him trying to pull his charred remains of his friend out of the car.
I don't know if he'll get that in detail. I'm sure this is the shot from the trailer where there's a wreck and he's like, no!
I don't remember that, but probably.
That's how the trailer ends.
Okay. The next thing Toby knew, he was surrounded by flashing lights coming from the bridge above. The sounds of sirens filled his ears. There were police and firefighters everywhere. Little Pete's body was in front of him, covered with a tarp. Some EMTs and the coroner were struggling to move it over the rocks and up the embankment. Another EMT was beside Toby, trying to treat his burns, but Toby was numb all over. He could only stare out at the river and watch the water go by. Chapter 8.
At least Dino called the police, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. 5 days later, inside a small graveyard on the west end of Mount Kisco, a group of people all dressed in black were gathered around a freshly dug grave. A priest's words drifted above the scene. "Fear not," he intoned, "for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand."
I would like to tell you that I don't know why, but the Burnout does this occasionally, and exactly as the Chapter 8 began, church bells began tolling in this game.
Good job, that's great. You're the best. Most everyone in the crowd was crying or fighting off tears, but some people were shit-faced. This book's reliance on this stupid, vague language is the worst. Because every single time I just want to retort with what someone is obviously not doing.
Like what?
Well, it's like most everyone in the crowd was crying or fighting off tears. That means some people were not. Some people were just fine. They were having a fine, dandy day out in the sunshine.
Badly written book. Who knew?
But Anita was particularly distraught. Her younger brother Pete was now deceased and about to be lowered into the ground. Way to undercut the emotion of that sentence by just using a lifeless word like deceased.
And about to be lowered into the ground. I've written a chapter about a funeral. It's hard. But
for comfort in this difficult hour, she was leaning on the shoulder of another mourner, Dino Brewster. He went to the funeral. Like, he's not the bad guy. I bet he's about to do the really bad thing. I don't know. "Behold," the priest went on, "all those who are incensed against you shall be ashamed and disgraced. They shall be nothing. You shall seek them and not find them, those who contend with you. For those who war against you shall be as nothing. For I will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you." I feel like if that was the case, he would have, like, steered off of the median or whatever.
yeah, I don't know.
Hand of God, turn the wheel the other way.
The priest began to quote Pulp Fiction.
Benny and Joe Peck were also there. Benny was taking it very hard. When the priest finished the final prayer, Benny shut his eyes and tried to breathe deep, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. His friend was gone.
He was deceased.
Joe, on the other hand, was staring right across the open grave, leveling his eyes on Dino. It was an icy glare, chilling to the bone, and to Joe, the fact that Dino refused to look back at him said it all. 9. Yes, 20 pages about the stupid car chase, and then literally a page and a half about the funeral.
Jesus Christ. You're kidding. He couldn't have somehow got more out of the funeral.
Nope. New York State's headquarters.
Oh my god.
What?
I just drove on the ceiling in Burnout. I managed that.
Oh, really?
I jumped and also did a barrel roll, but there was a roof above me. It was amazing. It was the best.
Okay, we're gonna stop and I'm gonna look, 'cause I bet this is about to happen on this.
It's the tiniest thing. It's like...
Oh, man!
Yeah!
Good job. That's pretty great. That's cool.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I hope they're driving the ceiling and need for speed. No, they don't.
Nope. New York State Police Headquarters. The interrogation room was cold and dank. The walls were plain, dull green, with old paint chipping off just about everywhere.
Him from Law and Order walked in.
Everything smelled of spilled coffee, cigarette smoke, and sweat. This is where Bunk and Freeman show up.
Looks like the auto repairs are going to be busy for
Toby was sitting in a squeaky metal chair, an old wooden desk in front of him. It seemed like he'd been inside the damp, smelly room for days. He couldn't really tell. Time as he knew it had lost all meaning for him. His entire world had changed the moment little Pete died. It was like he was walking and talking and existing by some sort of weird remote control. Whenever he closed his eyes, all he could hear was Pete burning to death. The flames, the smoke, the noise, the river water rushing by, Toby knew nothing would ever be the same. But the real blow came later on that awful day. That's when the police charged him with killing little Pete. 2 state police detectives were sitting across the table from him now. They'd been questioning him for hours, days. Again, Toby really didn't know. He was just numb, inside and out. Okay, let's go through this one more time, Mr. Marshall, when the detectives started again. The report still shows this fatality was caused by a 2-car accident. The second detective piped up. Tell us again where you claim this mysterious third vehicle was, he said again. Toby began speaking again, but it sounded like someone else's voice. He told them the exact same story more than a dozen times already. My car was about 2 lengths out in front, he said wearily, pointing to the diagram of the accident scene, sitting on the old wooden table. Pete was there. Dino Brewster was right behind him. Dino hit Pete's back bumper hard and at an angle, and Pete lost control of his car. That's how it happened. Dino caused the crash. The detectives shook their head. But Dino has 2 solid witnesses, one said, and they both say they were with him all day and the whole night. So there's no way he could have been there to cause that crash.
What? I know the book's really badly written, and I know it's obvious he's about to get charged with what have you, but why would you announce it 4 paragraphs before they actually charge him with it? Like, surely you'd want to build some tension.
But again, the detective's words are barely registering with Toby. Try as he might, he couldn't think clearly about anything else except the fact that little Pete was gone. The cops were relentless, though. They took his lack of feeling as a sign of weakness and a symptom that he was lying about what had really happened on the bridge. The owner of Brewster Motors reported that 2 Koenigsegg's were stolen last week. The other detective said harshly, "That's 2 cars, not 3. His report also says those 2 cars were stolen 7 minutes before the police arrived at the scene of the crash." Toby momentarily snapped out of his stupor. The owner of Brewster Motors is Dino's uncle, he told the cops. He's lying. They're all lying. Dino did it. Dino was there. You're the only one who places Dino at the scene, the detective replied. You got any other facts you'd like to share? Facts also quotes for the record.
Nice.
There were 3 cars, Toby insisted wearily. Dino was there. The detectives exchanged glances. People lied to them every day. They were used to it, and in their own way, numb to it. They simply weren't buying Toby's story. Then where's the 3rd car? One of them asked. Wouldn't it be wrecked too? At that point, Toby went back into his disembodied state. This isn't happening, he said to himself over and over. This just isn't happening. The trial was a nightmare. Toby vowed early on to just tell the story straight as it happened, blow by blow. And that's what he did over and over during endless hours of cross-examination. But he was up against the powerful Brewster family, and they proved to be a formidable foe. No matter how many times he told the truth, the prosecutors put on rebuttal witnesses, all of whom were either in the Brewster family's employ or were friends of theirs. These people lied under oath that Dino was nowhere near the scene of the accident, and that only 2 Koenigsegg's could have been stolen that night because only 2 Koenigsegg's were in the mansion's garage in the first place. The 3rd hypercar, the one Dino had been driving, had vanished. Toby's lawyer tried to find documentation on its sale, its purchase price, and when it arrived in the United States, but failed on all 3 accounts. All smoking gun of these cars are unmarked.
Toby's lawyer is terrible. Like, you don't have to focus on proving Dino was there, you just have to prove that you didn't clip the other guy. Like,
yeah, seems totally reasonable.
Just, I've watched, like, I know nothing about law, but that's
I've played some video games about the law.
Played some video
and
games.
I've watched a lot of shows and movies about the law.
I've watched Law and Order a bunch. And he's going about this all wrong.
And even if they're just trying to shoot for that fake movie law, they failed.
Yes, no. They have failed on every level.
Survive the drive northeast to the Coast Guard HQ.
The only evidence available was on the purchase of 2 Koenigsegg's by Dino's wealthy uncle. There was plenty of documentation for them. Delivery confirmations, shipping manifests. What?
What about the guy who was listening to country?
Or the guy that careened over the edge and this wreck.
Yeah.
For
all those other people that it made a point of introducing.
aided by all this, and the implication that the Brewsters were an upstanding family while Toby was just a hard-edged grease monkey, the prosecutors were able to make the case that there were only 2 Koenigsegg's in the garage that afternoon, but there were only 2 racing on. They were the only 2 racing on the road, and Little Pete's car had been forced off the road, which led to his death. And the only one around who could have done it was Toby. The charge was vehicular manslaughter plus auto theft. At one point, Toby's attorney was negotiated a deal or if Toby pled guilty, he would get the charges reduced and thus get a lighter sentence. But Toby refused. He was innocent, and there was no way he was going to plead guilty to killing his best friend when he didn't do it. The crew from the garage showed up at the trial every day. Before every court session, Toby scanned the gallery and always found Benny, Joe Peck, and Finn sitting there in their bad suits and ill-fitting ties, giving him the thumbs up and offering signs of encouragement. But even their moral support couldn't change the inevitable. In all, it only took 3 weeks. Toby was found guilty on both counts and sentenced to 2 to 5 years in a state prison. I feel like that's not the charge of vehicular manslaughter, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't actually know.
I don't know. I have not researched this.
No, but that seems a little light to me. I don't know. You killed a man.
I don't know.
But then, I don't know. A lot of people, vehicular manslaughter is a weirdly common thing to have happen, so I don't know.
Maybe this podcast is not equipped to get into the wide-ranging issue that is sentencing laws.
Not a podcast. This is a video show.
That's true.
This is a packaged audiovisual product. Dead silence of that.
Is there a B? I was waiting for B.
It was devastating to hear the verdict read aloud. But it only got worse after that. Toby had spent so much money on the trial that he couldn't afford any kind of appeal. He'd sold his family's house, some family heirlooms, even his Gran Torino, but it was all for nothing. The day he walked into prison, there's a car going by. The day he walked into prison, he was broke. He was a convicted felon, and his father's business had been shut down. The destruction of his life as he knew it was complete. He'd lost everything. Part 4.
Oh, okay.
We have about 18 pages left, which will detail his entire time in prison.
Oh, wait. Hang on a minute. I thought he just walked out of prison.
No, he was sentenced to 2 to 5 years. His life's gone.
But I thought it said by the time he walked out of prison, everything was gone.
No, by the time he walked out of the courtroom, I think.
Oh, but you said
I
prison.
mean, walked into prison.
Oh, into prison. Okay, I thought that was
Paused to
them.
defend himself, took everything.
I thought that was them skipping prison wisely.
No, doing prison.
Oh, okay, well that's good because I thought, we would miss important character development.
Yeah.
And most importantly, his friend that he makes in prison.
Chapter 10.
Oh, the best thing about prison, there are no cars to describe.
Oh man, you're right. That's why this only takes 18 pages. What if there's an auto shop at the prison?
Oh, there is. Of course there is. Is there?
I don't know.
Tell.
Toby's first few days in prison were pure hell. The loneliest sound he'd ever heard was the clank of the huge sealed door shutting behind him the moment he walked inside.
No, that's
Goodbye, world, thought. Maybe forever. No, 2 to 5 years is not forever, unless you get stabbed, I guess. He tried to psych himself up in the days and hours leading up to it. Tried to tell himself he'd be strong and that he could get through it. But he quickly realized nothing could prepare him for the nightmare he found himself in. From when they took his clothes, to his delousing, or douching as it was known, to putting on his prison uniform, to when they finally put him in a cell and locked the door. None of it. Is he in a German prison? Douche is shower.
Yeah.
You knew
Good
this.
pull. I knew
Take
that.
to the
Good
roads
pull.
Okay.
without the knowledge of back streets and
So he's going to prison in Germany, so that's cool. They make cars there.
Yep.
None of it seemed real, and he just couldn't get over the feeling that it was actually happening to someone else. Then there were the chains. No matter where he was those first few nights, or what time, day or night, all he could hear were chains. Chain shackles dragging on the floor. Guards carrying chains to bind someone up. Other prisoners with chains hidden in their pants to be used as weapons on their way to give some new meat a beatdown or worse. He's in, like, 70s exploitation prison.
He's not in Germany at all. He's in 70s exploitation prison. Oh no.
That's alright, he'll probably learn harmonica or something. Chains, he even began to hear them in his sleep. It took a few days for the cold reality of it all to sink in, the realization that his life was no longer his own. He was not allowed to do anything unless he was told to. Eat, sleep, shit, shave, even flicking his cell's light switch on or off was forbidden. They don't have light switches! I know that, and I've never been into a prison.
I didn't know that, but also I had never considered the concept of prison cell light switches until...
There's a lights out. They shut off the lights, and then everyone goes to bed, and in the morning they turn them all on. Everything was regimented. Everything was done their way. The lights. He just sounds like a petulant teenager about this. He's like, I'm in boot camp, and I don't like it.
Yeah, he's not actually got into what actually sucks.
He's gonna smoke some reefer and get Section 8 out of there or something.
Yeah, this is
Every prisoner had to be ready to leave his cell precisely 5 minutes later. A long, slow march down to the cafeteria followed, more chains dragging everywhere. Breakfast was usually tepid oatmeal or cold processed eggs. Each was equally bad. Back to the cells for a mandatory count, and more often than not, a surprise search. New meat were always harassed by the guards. Getting one cell tossed could be daily or even hourly event. Some kind of workday followed. Toby had been assigned to the laundry. It was hot, smelly, disgusting. A place where the foul sheets, towels, uniforms, socks, and underwear of 2,500 inmates was never ending. The only break was the long march down to lunch, which was just as awful as breakfast. Then more hot and sweaty work until dinner, which was usually the worst meal of all. Lights went out at 8 p.m., followed by a night of ear-piercing screams, demonic laughter, repulsive grunting, and more chains. Then it all started all over again at 5 a.m. the next day. The idea was to take away every last bit of a person's physical freedom, and Toby knew early on that once that was complete, his freedom to think would be taken next. I mean, yeah, it's a prison. You're not supposed to have freedom.
That is literally the point of a prison. That is...
But like his weird, like 18th century Bedlam psychiatric hospital prison that he's describing, like it's just getting more and more cartoonish.
And then Hugo Weaving from Cloud Atlas showed up.
The prison was also an extremely dangerous place, as he soon found out. The guards weren't there to protect the inmates. It was clear from the beginning that was not how the system is capitalized, worked. The guards were more like onlookers, referees, caretakers of the status quo. Many of them were corrupt, paid off by the prisoners or their families. Their main concern then was that no one on the inside rocked the boat. You know, like, prisons are problematic. There's a lot of abuses, but none of it is because the prisoners are paying off the goddamn guards.
No. This is it.
Whoever wrote this book is an idiot.
Oh, you think?
Like, not just a bad writer, but just a dumb person.
That's not necessarily true. Let's cut them. This is an on-contract thing.
route completed and
You know,
a car
I
awarded.
don't think they can get into actual structural analysis of what is
Like, these are
functional
things that
prisons.
any human being who is an adult should know.
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable personally insulting this guy for this terrible
I'm
book.
DJ Atomica for Crash
Okay, yeah,
FM. We
fine,
just
you
got
are
news
right.
of a race occurring here in our very
What if he's
own
one of the
Paradise
4
City.
people watching
May the
this?
fastest, meanest
I'm
driver
sorry, guy, but write a goddamn better book.
Good point.
Like, spend a second, like, give it the 6-year-old test. Like, give it to a 6-year-old and ask them what's stupid, and then take that stuff out. It's not that hard.
To be fair, that test doesn't always work, but it's a good test.
I mean, he would probably say that you need less descriptions of cars and more like rockets going to the moon.
I know
And
many 6-year-olds that would say it needs more descriptions of cars. You know that for a fact that the 6-year-olds would be well into the descriptions of cars.
The system itself was run by the lifers, gangs of murderers and
got-
rapists who had nothing to lose by beating and robbing new meat. Sadists, sadistic and psychotic, they pretty much had full run of the place, including access to anyone's cell or work area. An attack could come at any time and in any place. What were you going to say?
You got really close to the mic then.
Yes.
You were just taking it down there.
Yanson P12 has been delivered to your junkyard.
Most perverse was that this constant terror provided the kind of horrific stability to the place. Management through fear ruled within the prison walls. Not guards or guns or billiard clubs. Just plain unadulterated fear. And the newer you were to the system, the more dangerous it could be. On his 5th day, Toby was washing his face in the shitter when he looked in the mirror to see another prisoner, a gang member standing behind him, holding a machete. I was not joking about this big 70s exploitation prison.
You really will not.
He was giving Toby the finger across his throat sign. The meaning was clear. You're next. Later that day, another inmate came up to Toby in the laundry and claimed he'd seen what had happened earlier. He offered to help Toby out of his jam in return for some unspecified services Toby could provide him in the future.
He's really in the most exploitation prison ever.
Toby, smart enough to know he was being set up. Much to the man's surprise, he told the helpless inmate no thanks. He'd handle the situation himself. The man replied, "Okay, nice knowing you." Later that night, Toby heard the door to his cell open. It was supposed to be locked at 8 p.m., but obviously this was not coming in to check on him. Toby was ready with the only weapon he had at his disposal, a sharpened pencil. He saw the glint of the machete. There's no actual... You don't get pencils in prison. You get felt-tip pens. I know, my dad worked corrections for years and years. Just so you don't stab guards with pencils.
Yeah, pretty obvious. Thing one, take out all the sharp things.
He saw the glint of the machete drawing near and was never more scared in his life. But that's when his survival instincts kicked in. He aimed low and stuck his would-be assailant in the groin with the pencil. It went in deep and as smoothly as a knife through butter. As a pencil through someone's thigh.
I've never stabbed anyone with a pencil.
I
But,
feel like it would be harder than that.
yes, I would assume so.
The attacker doubled over from the unexpected preemptive strike, hitting the floor on the cell hard and conveniently cracking open his skull.
His brain dribbled out onto the floor.
Even the book comments that this is convenient. This is bad. This is not good.
No, it is not good.
When the guards eventually arrived, they found the attacker curled up on the ground, bleeding profusely, with Toby sitting calmly on the edge of his bunk. When they asked what happened, Toby told them he tripped. Toby was sent to a psychiatric hospital, I wish, in a better book, because he's a psychopath who just murdered this man.
Yeah. Oh, I like the way that Toby has gone from completely unable to manage even the basic realities of prison life to completely... like, there's not been any arc. He's gone from, oh no, I can't handle prison, to I have psychologically adjusted and can now kill anyone at will.
He knew what would happen next, though he was sure he'd gain some cred among those lowly prisoners who lived in daily fear of the system. He also knew he'd be a marked man by the lifers. The next day at breakfast, he walked up to the largest member of the Machete Man's gang. And Machete Man's gang is a great band name, by the way. And without warning, started wailing on him with his fists and feet. This is actually the plot that happens in the prison in Face Off, where he just walks up to like the biggest guy and hits him with his like tray of food. To Toby's good fortune, the man's weapon of choice, a doorknob carried in a sock. Where does a doorknob come from? It's a prison, they don't have doorknobs.
This is just like a school converted into a prison, is what it sounds like.
Anyway, that doorknob in a sock fell out of this dude's pocket. That's what happened. Toby picked it up and started thrashing him with that as well. The others in the Machete gang stood back and let it happen. Only one man had a machete. The rest of these guys have disparate weapons. I wouldn't call it a Machete gang.
Machete Man's gang.
It just says Machete gang this time. Not in caps, though. So there's that.
They're
That
big
was
fans of the
like-
film Machete.
That was the way these little things worked. It took Toby 2 long minutes to hammer his victim into consciousness. I hope those 2 minutes are uninterrupted this movie. Smack out in the middle of the film, Toby beating him into death with the doorknob in
The
his
scene directed by Steve McQueen. Toby just a long uncomfortable shot of Toby just
When the guards arrived and saw what had happened, they were convinced Toby was not someone who wanted to play within the system. He was immediately put in shackles and put in the hole, prison slang for solitary confinement.
Thank you, I know, I've seen a film.
This was not like his cell with bars and walls and a window. This was a stark concrete room, just 5 feet by 8 feet. There was no bunk, just a metal slab. There was no toilet, just an open drain in the floor. There was no window, just 3 vertical slits in the door and a slot at the bottom for metal trays, or for meal trays, not metal trays. Maybe metal trays. Maybe in this movie,
Carson Inferno van has been delivered to
there would be
your
no
judge.
reading material, no music, no pens or paper or photographs to hang or look at. There was nothing but the walls, the drain, and the metal slab. When they closed the door on him, the guard said, "See you in 6 months."
What?
This is not how this works. Like even like the like weird exposés on like the worst supermax prisons in the world. This is not how this works.
No.
After that, Toby sat in the corner and shook uncontrollably for hours. But he'd accomplished his goal. He was alone with no one to bother him. From that day on, he began prepping for what he hoped would be the second part of his life. He also came up with a plan. Toby was not a religious person. He'd never gone to church, never followed any one creed, so he didn't know any prayers other than ordinary generic ones. Those are Christian prayers, like that's one creed, because I'm sure that all his prayers are dumb Christian ones because this is America. But that didn't matter. For this, the longest 2 years of his life, in jail for killing his best friend, knowing full well he was innocent and that the guilty party was not just out there walking free, but also banging his ex-girlfriend.
Toby still in prison. His life has been completely ruined. Finds a way to be the worst.
In a giant ellipses, okay, it's just 3. I thought it was 4-period ellipses. I was gonna call bullshit. For this, an ordinary prayer would not do. For this, he needed to make up one of his own.
Making up his own prayers. He means business.
I've like clockwork every day pushed through the slot at the bottom of his door. They came with plastic utensils, all of which had to be accounted for when the tray was taken away. One day, Toby broke one of the plastic knives in half and stuck the handle in the mash of the leftover food. He was hoping no one would bother to check if the other half was still attached. He waited a week, but no one said a word. He used his half a knife to painstakingly carve a prayer into the concrete wall, chip by chip, in a space right above the door. That way he could see it, read it anytime he wanted to, and yet it would be invisible to the guards looking in on him. He wrote his prayer just 2 or 3 words at a time, and only after much thought it went into what would fit and what would not. Each word had because there was no chance for erasure. The concrete was unforgiving in that respect. Once he carved his letters into it, they were there to stay. It took him... This is like the most amazing thing in the world! Like, this movie just turned into pure cheese.
I'm imagining Aaron Paul getting the script, reading this bit, and then like, so there's a montage where I write a prayer 3 words a day on a wall with a plastic knife. Okay.
Half a plastic knife.
Half a plastic knife, yes, exactly.
It took him more than 2 months to complete it. You can't even cut a hot dog with a plastic knife before it snaps in half. I don't know how you put anything into a wall.
Well, he snapped it in half first. He took care of it.
It's that cheap, like, Shawshank Redemption concrete is what it is. It took him more than 2 months to complete it, but in the end he was happy with it. In his mind, it was perfect, and said it all. They took everything from me, but I do not fear, for you are with me.
The trailer!
All those who hide me shall be ashamed and disgraced. Those who wage war against me shall perish. I will find strength, find guidance, and I will triumph. He recited the prayer at least a couple dozen times a day. On some days, even more. He spent his time in isolation doing a regimen of his own. Morning was devoted to push-ups, leg squats, and other kinds of exercise, including many isometric drills he'd made up.
Oh man, I hope Toby in the first half is kind of a chubby car nerd.
He'd been scrappy and fearless when he first went into prison. By the end of his first 2 months, he still had his lean frame, but whatever body fat he'd accumulated by drinking beer and eating junk food on the outside had been replaced by pure, solid muscle. But he knew he would need more than just a six-pack, and then just six-pack abs if his long-range plan was to succeed. So afternoons were reserved for doing mind exercises of a very specific order.
The Jedi Order.
This is great. This is amazing. It's like the dumbest, like, meathead Count of Monte Cristo bullshit I've ever heard. He would sit in his corner and put himself into a kind of trance and relive every car race he'd ever been in. From go-karts to shifter cars to his first street races, every box race he'd driven in, every pull race he'd run out on the I-684, even that fateful one with Dino and Little Pete, he was able to conjure them up vividly and replay them again over and over in his head. He was able to recall every move he'd make, commit to memory every positive maneuver, and dwell especially on the ones that turned out to be wrong. He reviewed in his mind every part, gear, paddle, and switch of every vehicle he'd ever raced from the shifter cars on, concentrating on, of course, on his beloved Gran Torino. He was able to immerse himself in his memories, which were all he really had left, but he was able to learn from them, and that was the most important thing. On special nights, and he did this sparingly, he would put himself into his trance and think about those few glorious moments he'd experienced that morning, driving the Shelby Mustang at Shepperton. He'd always begin this particular mind exercise by remembering everything, exactly how it was that day, the weather, how the track looked, how little Pete was so excited, how he'd bought the Shelby into that first turn wide so he could slingshot himself onto the straightaway, how he'd reached and then surpassed that magic 230-mile-per-hour number. After many of these special occasions, he would fall asleep sitting upright in his corner and dream about that special morning all over again. I'm masturbating furiously during all of this, I'm sure. Because, god damn it. Those hours of days and months in the hole strengthened him physically, but more important, they bulked him up mentally. He knew that would be needed most of all for what lay ahead. He spent a total of 13 months in the hole, extended by his mouthing off to his guards at one point.
If you spend
And when he
13
was
months in the hole, so you're not done.
and when he was caught by design, stealing his plastic utensils. When he was finally let out into the general population, he fell in with a bunch of fellow motorheads, car thieves mostly. They formed a substantial group and were pretty much left alone by the other gangs. This is just like the Need for Speed 8 crew spilling over into this movie, I assume.
I hope the entire film is just the prison bit and the rest is whatever. Because I want what's about to happen is a mashup of a prison movie and a high school movie, it feels like.
Just wait, you're about to get the stupidest thing in the world.
Okay, bring it.
Just one day out of the hole, he got a prison tattoo. It was simple, written on his left forearm. It read, Pete 392. His attention, I don't know what 392 means.
I don't know.
His intention was to always have something there to remind him of his little brother, his friend. It was only after that he realized that by extension, anytime he looked at it, it also reminded him of Pete's beautiful sister, Anita. I mean, he's been in solitary confinement for 13 months.
Yeah, I
feel like everything's gonna
when he was
Anita.
going through the memories, I was waiting for it to get to something, And then he relived
west to the
the
Crystal
time
Summit
at that
Observatory.
kissing point that it went into for 3 pages before.
Yep.
Was it their first sex?
Yes, for their first sex. Up on the point. Then came the day, exactly 1 month before his release, when he got a letter from Benny talking about that year's De Leon and how Monarch was looking for racers. At that moment, Toby knew it had all been worth it, because suddenly he was sure about what he'd been working for. No one ever came to visit him while he was in prison. That's the way he wanted it. He didn't write any letters during the majority of his incarceration either. Except for that 2-week period where he sent a lot of poetry. He shared his prayer with all of his friends.
I feel you dying inside every single time it uses the majority type phrase when it means all the time. He never for the majority. It's undercutting it. It's the thing they tell you not to do in the first year you pick up a pen.
Phone calls to Benny and Joe Peck had gotten him by. Oh, so he was just being a chatty Cathy. That's all right. But the one letter he did write had been to Mark Ingram, the wealthy owner of the Super Shelby Mustang. All of that in capitals. So Super Shelby Mustang.
Super Shelby Mustang.
It gets angry and the hair turns yellow, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, sorry.
Super Shelby Mustang level 4, he turns into a giant monkey.
It's true, he does.
Toby had started this letter out with the words, "You will think this a strange request, but..." After that, the letters went back and forth furiously with Joe and Benny. The phone calls became more frequent, too. Something was building. His plan was moving full speed ahead. When his day finally came, Toby didn't even read the prison release papers. He simply signed on the dotted line and pushed them back under the metal mesh window to the prison employee. He looked different. Older, rougher, tougher. But he felt different, too. No more wasting time. No more whining about the bum deal he'd gotten. He had important things to do. He picked up the bag holding his meager belongings and waited for the last barred door to open. Then he walked out into the sunlight and tasted freedom for the first time in 2 years. Just outside the release gate, an old Ford pickup truck was waiting. Benny was behind the wheel. He leapt out of the cab as soon as Toby walked out. He gave Toby a quick pound hug, and they both jumped into the truck. I like that they had to emphasize it's a bro hug, just in case.
Yeah.
Where's
He
Joe?
reached
Toby
Benny,
asked.
he kissed him passionately. And they drove off into the sunset.
Oh, way better movie.
Right?
Where's Joe? Toby asked Benny simply. Already on the road with the beast, Benny reported. If your plan is going to work, he's going to need a head start. What about Finn? Toby asked. Benny shook his head. We still haven't convinced him, he replied. He went down another path, but we're still trying. Benny turned the ignition key and started the old truck. But as the car come through, Benny asked his friend, that's the most important thing. Toby checked his watch. We'll know in an hour. Okay, Benny said. We're cutting a little close, don't you think? Toby just shrugged and looked out of the window, his thoughts already a million miles away. Hey, Toby, Benny said, bringing him back to reality. Toby turned to his friend. Good to see you out, man, Benny told him. Toby just nodded and almost smiled. It was good to be out. 11. Toby and Benny reached their destination about an hour later. It was an abandoned building located on 6565 Main Street, Mount Kisco. Many of its windows had been broken and its doors busted in. Junk cars sat deteriorating in the parking lot. Litter and trash were everywhere. The sign that once proudly read Marshall Motors estimated 1970